Welcome to this episode of the UK Sports Chat podcast. I'm Joe Williams, and on today's episode I speak with Kevin Seaward. Kevin is a Northern Irish marathon runner and teacher, and he has represented his country at the Olympics, notably Rio in 2016. He also came fourth in the Commonwealth Games marathon in 2018 and is hoping to be selected for Tokyo Olympics next year. Enjoy this interview with Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, it's great to be talking to you. Cheers. If you can hear the fireworks going off in the background, it's please excuse them. But it is November the 5th.
It is. It's brilliant for us. It's not so good for our four-legged furry friends. My boy's not too happy right now. He's hiding under the table.
Yeah, we've got a cockapoo Penny. She's downstairs, cuddled up next to my fiance. Bless them. Cool. So, like I say, brilliant. Thank you for coming on. It's really good to chat to you. I've done a little bit of an introduction there, but do you want to give us a bit of an introduction into yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Kevin Seaward. I describe myself as a teacher first and a runner second. I've been running for all my life, pretty much since secondary school. So got into it quite young, and right the way through to now. And I have to say that every time I go for a run, it feels exactly the same as it did the very first run way back in my St Malachy's days on the streets of Belfast. So I still get the same enjoyment from it. I'm an assistant principal at a large secondary school in Leicestershire. Yeah. And I'm also an Olympian. I represented Ireland in the 2016 Olympic Games.
Brilliant, thank you. It's interesting you say you still feel the same as that first run now. I mean, surely that's a key to everything, not just running, isn't it?
I think that excitement, that enjoyment. I'm not going to pretend that every time I go for a run I feel amazing, or even the motivation's there all the time. But I certainly enjoy every run now exactly the same as I did as a young schoolboy athlete. But you're absolutely right. I could say the same about my work and my employment every day. I enjoy that as well, and kind of makes it much more fun and much more inviting when you do get that enjoyment from both running and from working.
Yeah, cool. So are you the cool teacher in school then? Because you're in the Olympic. Because you've been in the Olympics.
I usually get asked did I win, and when I say no, I think the conversation ends quite quickly. No, I'm joking. Yeah, the children are really great at sort of asking me questions about the Olympic Games and about sport in general. Quite a few of our students really do aspire to be involved in sport at schoolboy level right through to international level. Where we're positioned in Leicester, there's quite a few good athletics clubs, and there's an abundance of other sports clubs. We have some children who play academy football, for example, and they like to kind of take away the key messages of what can they do now to be better performers in the future and to still be in the sport in a decade's time.
Yeah. So you're part of the leadership team in the school then, are you?
Yeah, so I'm an assistant principal. I moved I'm at Beecham College in Leicester. So I moved to this school in August actually. Switched roles during lockdown, which is a very unusual thing to do. I've really enjoyed it. So it's a much bigger school than I came from. It's 2,500 students, and we've got a really strong leadership team there. So yeah, I'm involved in the leadership team, and I also look after our special educational needs provision within the school.
Okay, cool. So do you still teach much then, being in that position, or?
Yeah, so I still teach. I don't know if many teachers are listening right now, and what I'm about to say, they'll say that's not much. But I still teach. So I teach around about 8 hours a week on average. So it's not a huge amount, but it's enough to really. Cause I get so much from the teaching itself. And being a PE teacher, again, the second gasps from the teachers listening right now. Being a PE teacher, I just really enjoy being in the classroom and working with the children every day.
Yeah. I bet you've. Well, I wonder if you've got an eye for spotting talent as well. But I know we haven't dug into what you do yet. But because of your background and because of how much running you do, if you can just spot somebody with a bit of talent who's coming through in your school.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you think of the Mo Farah story, and he says that his PE teacher was the kind of the catalyst for everything, spotted him in school and said maybe you're not a footballer, you might be a runner.
Yeah,
And I think we can all kind of relate to that in some ways when our PE teachers have kind of directed us towards the sports that we're now involved in. But definitely, we've got some really talented students, and when I see them perform, I'm sometimes in awe of their talent and think I didn't have an ounce of what they have of natural ability at their age, and it's kind of nurturing that through to elite performance at a senior level.
yeah, yeah. Cool, brilliant. So I've lots of questions myself, but I also put out on Twitter, which I like to do when we have guests on. And one of the questions is that we got asked was from it was how do you Kev is a VP in a school, isn't he? How can he get all his marking done and find time to train at the level he competes at?
I think I might have sneakily answered half of that. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry to the chemists and the mathematicians out there, but my main subject is physical education.
yeah,
So I teach mostly core PE, and do teach some examination PE. But the real answer is even when I was teaching much more and teaching more examination sessions,
mhm,
therefore more marking, I kind of bought myself that little bit of extra time in the day by running early. So I'm lucky now that I can run to work.
yeah.
I do my 10 miles
Cool.
to work in the
So,
morning,
so
and it
I,
kind of buys me that
so,
extra hour.
yes, yeah. So, how did you get into running then? Have you always ran since you were a kid, or were you into other sports when you were growing up? What's your story?
So I had a good broad experience. So the school I went to St Malachy's College in Belfast, and really renowned school for sport and for music actually, but mostly for sport. And had a real broad experience of sports as a school kid. So played a lot of
Hmm.
football, played some Gaelic games and other Irish sports,
Yeah,
and maybe thought I was a lot better at football than I potentially was. And I remember doing really well in the multi-stage fitness test. I know a lot of children dread it, but I
yeah,
did quite well in it. And Paddy McKillop, and at the time, the PE teacher, sort of said, I think you could be a pretty good runner." So I went to the athletics club, and it was a nightmare. It wasn't the fun that he promised me. I was trailing behind all these guys who'd been training for months and
yeah,
years, some of them.
yeah,
So I didn't take to it like a duck to water. But I think one thing I did have was I was really stubborn, and I still am a bit stubborn, but I was really stubborn, so I didn't want to let go. I just
yeah,
kept coming back and kept coming back, and before long, I sort of, with running being such a straightforward sport, the more I did it, the better I was getting at it, and it was probably around about sort of sixth form, so sort of 16, 17, that I really started to show the sort of talent that others thought they'd seen in me.
yeah. Brilliant. Was there a specific race or something that really made you feel like you had not only caught up with them, but you were perhaps surpassing them then when you were at college?
Yeah, well, I can remember going. I can remember going home the summer of sort of what we call fifth year. So it's year 11,
Yep.
and coming back as our schools are through schools, so they're 11 to 18, and coming back as a year 12,
Hmm.
and running the Ulster schools cross country, and I won the Ulster schools cross country the previous year as a year 11 in top of that sort of intermediate age group. I was about 52nd in the Ulster schools. So I came back over the summer holidays, and I'd just
Yep.
grown up a little bit in general. So physically and kind of emotionally, I'd grown up a lot, and came back and kind of had a good early part of the winter, and went to the Ulster schools that year and was our first scorer, and won the Ulster schools. So I think that was probably the turning point where I started to think maybe there is some truth in this, and I do have a little bit of talent for running.
Yeah.
So that was probably the real turn point for me.
Did you not believe it up to then?
Well, I think it was context. I think context is always king. And I look back at it and say that the school I went to had quite a strong tradition of running. There were 4 by 1,500 meter world schools record holders, and so when I
Yeah.
was comparing myself to those guys, I was not doing quite as well in training and not doing quite as well in racing. If I was to take myself out of the situation, that context, and compare it maybe to other schools, I was probably doing okay. But no is the answer. I didn't really believe it until then, and then it sort of maybe rung true a little bit that potentially I could have a bit of a future in athletics.
Mm-hmm. So when you finished college, then where was your head at then? Because you clearly had a career that you wanted to go into. So what happened next?
Not a great deal, I think. So I through sixth form, I had quite a few good races and picked up some Irish medals and some junior cross country vests, and then went off to university and I kind of lost the passion a little bit. And that stumbled on for quite some time. It took me a while to really find that desire back, to really want to race. I did a lot of running. I think running's great, and I enjoyed going for a run, and I never lost that. But what I did lose was that kind of passion to want to go and race week on week. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever unknown reason, I still can't put my hand on it because it came back. It took time, but it came back with a force. But it just disappeared for a while, and so I kind of rumbled through university doing the odd race here or there at intervarsity type level, but not much to shout about, until I came to Loughborough and for PGCE a bit later on, and kind of found that fire again.
So where were you at uni?
I went to university undergraduate at the University of Ulster in Jordanstown, so Northern Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
and did my undergrad there, and then came across to Loughborough University to do a Masters in Education, or PGCE.
Oh, okay, so did Loughborough influence you then? Obviously, being the facility that it is, did that have play any part?
I think it did. When I first arrived, I met the late George Gandhi, and he spoke to me about the history of Loughborough. So Sebco and all the great athletes that have passed through, but also the strength of the alumni that they had here that year, and that they really were hoping to win the varsity cross country, and that if I could get myself fit, then I might have a role to play in winning bucks or Busa or bucks it was then. So he showed that little bit of sort of interest in getting me back running. So I went along, did some of the training sessions, and kind of just showed up for a while for most of that year, and then got in with a nice bunch of lads and sort of got back into to running. It's kind of hard not to when every day there's someone to run with or there's a group to run with, and I needed that. I need that kind of company at that stage to kind of get me going again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The George Gandhi, I think, did he pass recently? Did I read that in Athletics Weekly?
Yeah, he did, sadly. So it's about 3 weeks ago now. Yeah, he sadly passed away. He's a real beacon of athletics in Loughborough, and I think he's world renowned, isn't he? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So sorry to go back to college. Then you won some Irish vests there.
Pardon?
So go back to your college time. You represented Ireland at college, did you?
So I represented Irish universities. I represented Ireland at a World Junior Cross country. It was kind of the first. And then there was a gap right the way through until 2014. So from 2003 to 2014 of not representing Ireland.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, I ran my first marathon and qualified for European Athletics Championships in Zurich.
And you did that in your first marathon?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. I know a lot of people, when they enter a marathon, they find out it was short, get a little bit annoyed, but I was delighted because the way I felt at 26 miles, I'd had enough. I was glad the finish line was there. So I ran Manchester, and at the time we didn't know it was short. So I ran Manchester Marathon to help out a friend who was offered to pace him, and then he got injured. So I decided, well, sure, I can give it a go. I'll do it myself. I've been running a lot at that stage, enough to get me through, but maybe not specific marathon stuff. So I was good for about 20 miles, and then I think the last 10k was something that I learned a lot of lessons there. But I got selected as a discretionary pick for the European Athletics Championships that year, and that's kind of where my desire to qualify for the Olympic Games really came from.
Okay, so what was the gap between training at Loughborough then and starting getting back into running in 2014? When were you?
So I was 2009 at Loughborough. sort of getting back into things full sort of flow then. But it wasn't really until I broke my foot at the end of 2013, and it was kind of then where I thought, actually, I miss not being able to compete. I miss not being able to race when I want to. So I made a promise that when I get back from that, actually, I really want to try a marathon at some stage. So I'll give one of the lads a hand and pace him to halfway in this one. So it was kind of 2009, and then sort of to 2014. I was doing a lot of running, but maybe not marathon specific stuff. And then 2014, I decided that was the year I was going to try to run a marathon.
Okay. So what distances were you running when you were younger?
So I ran a lot of 5Ks actually as a schoolboy athlete. So I definitely wasn't a natural 1500 meter or an 800 meter guy. I always leaned towards the endurance as opposed to being at the sharper end. So I did a lot of 5Ks and 10Ks and cross country, which is, anyone listening now who knows me will know that cross country is not a word you'll ever hear coming out of my lips with a fond memory, or find me doing anytime soon. But I did then, and it kind of built a lot of the base for me.
Yes. Okay. So you get to 2014, and you went to Manchester to pace your mate. Did you have any expectation on what kind of time you could run then, that you could?
No. So when I entered the pace, my friend, he sort of said he wanted to run around 2:15. So I was thinking, well, I can definitely run. I can pace you for 10 miles, maybe halfway. And then when he couldn't run, I decided I'll just run, and I'll try and run as close to the front as I can for as long as I can, and we'll just see what happens. And if I remember rightly, one of the lads went way off the front and it was too quick, but the group kind of were running around about sort of 5:20 per mile, thereabouts. I was thinking, this feels okay, so I'll just hang tight in here. So my aim was really just to finish as close to the front of that as I possibly could, and I ended up finishing third in the race in the end.
Yeah. What did you come in at?
So 2 hours 18:46 was the finish time, but then I think they tried to estimate how far short it was. So it was probably around about 2:19 and 2:19 high, maybe 2:20 low, somewhere around about there.
Yeah.
So still, like, looking back, so considering the work I did for it, and I wasn't being coached at that stage. I didn't have a coach, so the work I did for it to run a 2:20 was actually quite a good run out.
Yeah, quite good. So you had no coach. You were running with your mate. What happened after the race then? How did you know that you'd qualified for Europeans?
So I got home, and a couple of days later, it was Commonwealth Games year as well. So Athletics Northern Ireland called me and sort of said, well, you're not too far outside the 2:18 standard for Commonwealth Games. Yeah. And it works on a ranking system. So depending on other performances in other sports, you might be able to shout of getting a Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. But in the interim, while we were waiting for that to come back, Chris Jones was director of Endurance Athletics Ireland then. He called me up and said, how would you feel about joining the team to run? We can run 6 people at World or European Marathon Champs. Do you want to go? And I was like, do I want to go? This is brilliant. Delighted. Yeah. Over the moon. Really, really excited. Hung up the phone and thought, oh no, I've got to do this all over again. I couldn't even walk downstairs at this stage. So the excitement was very quickly replaced with sort of a bit of memories of that last 10K and thinking about getting things a little bit better for the next time around.
So there's all sorts of things to ask about that. So what did you think in terms of your work? Where were you working then? You were in a school?
I was teaching PE full time at a school just outside Loughborough. So I was teaching full time then.
Okay. So did you, because you didn't have a coach then, did you then get a coach?
Not just then. So I went to Europeans first. And when I was at European Championships, I roomed with another Irish athlete called Paul Pollock.
Yeah.
And after the race, Paul said, my coach is pretty good. You might have heard of him. So he tells me who his coach is and whose coach was coaching at that stage. And I was thinking, this chap won't want to coach me, but I'll ask anyway. And I said, Paul, would he be looking to coach another marathoner? And Paul said, I'll give him I'll give him a call and ask him. So it was Andy Hobdo. And Andy called me back and said, "Yep, send me through your training. Let me have a look at what you've been doing, and we'll have a chat about it." So I sent it through, and I just got a message back, just ha ha ha, you're going to run fast when you learn how to train properly. So right away, I knew it would be a good fit.
So is this? Forgive my ignorance, but is this fairly typical that people go and run at the Euros and they haven't had a coach, or you've kind of just done it, or are you a bit of an anomaly in that case?
I think it might be a little bit of an anomaly. Like I know that as a young athlete, I was quite gifted and it took me a while to realize that, as you said earlier. But I know I had a little bit of ability, and my ability was that I could run a lot and, touch wood, avoid injuries, not get injured too much. So that ability was probably what you need to be a good marathoner. So naturally I could run. I was running 80, 90 miles a week probably. I could do that all year. And it was just kind of turning that mileage that I could handle into something that would be more marathon specific, and make me a better marathoner.
So how did you prepare yourself for those Europeans if you didn't have a coach? What?
So I used Coach Google.
Yeah.
And I Googled some athletes, training logs.
Yeah.
And I had a look through, and I said, well, what if this stuff looks like it's really important? So I said, well, the long run, that looks really important. So I took that out. So we need to have that. And I had a look and said, well, how many of those did he do in this 12-week block that they have online? And they were, well, they do the really long ones 3 times. I said, well, I can do that. So I took that out and planned that in first. And then I said, well, what else did he do that looks important? And they said, well, they're doing some intervals that are a bit shorter. So I'll take those out and I'll put those in. How close to the long run did they put it in that training log? So I essentially built it looking at things online, and sort of put an A3 sort of calendar on the wall and just wrote on what it was I wanted to do and when I wanted to do it, and the sort of pace that I kind of want to do it at. So I looked at these guys, said they'd run 2:12. I was thinking, well, I can't run 2:12, but I want to try and run quicker than 2:18 at the time. So I had a look at what 2:17 sort of pace was, and well, that was the kind of pace I'd want to use for my long intervals, and worked out paces from that. So I very much just pieced it together, like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, using what I'd learned from the sport as a young athlete, about rest and recovery and the importance of those days, but built everything else around that, really.
Cool. Okay. So and how did you get on at the Euros?
So at Euros that year, I was 34th, so I was second at our score. I showed up there. We went for a tour around the course beforehand, and they dropped us off at the bottom of this hill and said, "Oh, you can get the funicular to the top." And I was like, "Oh, brilliant! This looks great." And as we're going up in the funicular, they said, "Oh, by the way, you run up this." So you can imagine the nightmares I was having for 3 days beforehand. Haven't seen the course. They went up this kind of zigzagged a mile up this massive hill. So around 2:20.
Was that a loop as well? Was it a loop that year?
Pardon?
Was the course a loop that year?
It was a loop course, yeah. It was in Zurich, so it was 10k laps. So we got that hill 4 times. And going uphill wasn't so bad because you can adjust your pace and kind of control it and run the effort. So similar sort of effort that you run on the flat. It was coming down. So coming down for the 4th time, I had enough. I was taking a skateboard if I could get one. My quads and everything just had enough of the running downhill section, so I wasn't really conditioned to so much downhill. And that was a tough enough last 5k, just kind of getting yourself to the finish line. But I was delighted that I finished second. I'd experienced my first trip abroad really to run in Zurich, and my first real senior Irish Fest. So I was taken back by the full environment and the full situation of really being there.
Yeah. Go on, tell us what your big learnings were then.
So I think the first one was to kind of have confidence in the fact that I deserved to be there. So I spent the first couple of days in a bit of awe of all these amazing athletes. And the marathoners that were there were truly world-class athletes. So I think it was believing in myself a little bit more that, I deserved to be there. I'd earned my right to be on the team and to run there. That was probably the first one. The second one is always check the destination of the train when you get on a train on your own, because you might find out that it's gone the wrong way by quite some distance, and if you're really unlucky, you're going to leave Switzerland and find yourself in a bit of trouble. It's definitely the second big learning there.
Where did you end up?
Pardon?
Where did you end up?
Nowhere too far, thankfully, because somebody said, "Are you look?" It must have been athletics fans. So I said, where are you going to?" And I said, "The hotel." And they're like, "Not on this train. You're not. You're gonna end up leaving Switzerland in about half an hour time. So you might want to turn get off the train at the next stop, cross over, and head your way back towards Zurich." But it could have been a lot worse than it was.
Cool. Okay. So, and what about if the route was a shock to you? Is that something that you've took forward and have a look at now? Or
Yeah, definitely. I think I went in with no real prior knowledge of. I loved athletics and loved sport, but no real prior knowledge. You could just Google the course profile, for example,
yeah,
and you could find the map online, and you could have all this information. So yes, definitely. Knowing the course is really important. Knowing where challenging bits are, if it's hilly, if it has cobbles, any of those sort of little things that might just be enough to throw you off your pattern a little bit, are
yeah,
really important at all levels. I think it's important to know that, what the train's like, and do your little bit of research beforehand, just to make sure that you are aware of the course that you're running on.
yeah. And that I mean these things that you're saying. I mean you're talking about competing at the highest level really, and but these are completely transferable to across our community. There's people who go out and run their first 5Ks and half marathons, and then they might run for a couple of years and want to run a PB. And the things you're talking about are all they're the same things, aren't they?
They absolutely are, and I think that idea of being resilient and not expecting instant success is really
Mm.
important. Now I say that I ran my first marathon and things went well, but I didn't start that way when I was a school athlete. Like, I very much struggled through things and really found it hard. Um, and it's just I keep coming back and keep showing up, and knowing that the beauty of running, the beauty of athletics, is that you tend to get rewarded for what you put in. And those rewards come in different things. So, for example, my reward was eventually qualifying for the Olympics.
Yeah,
Other rewards could be the sort of the emotional feeling that you get, the well-being, the progress, the weight loss, a whole host of things. 5K
yeah,
PBs, running 5K even, that first time you complete a 5K, and sort of
yeah,
taking those successes with you, and remembering that what you put into to running into athletics, you'll definitely get back.
yeah. Definitely, definitely. So you've come out of those Euros with a coach and a lot of learning. So yeah, and you've just touched on the Olympics. So what happened next?
So I was desperate to run, ironically desperate to run another marathon. And the
Mhm.
first thing Andy said is no, you're not going to do that. You're going to learn to train properly first of all.
Yeah,
So we sat down and he sent me through my next training block, and I looked at it, and the first thing I thought was, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. It's so different to what I was doing beforehand. The sessions were
yeah,
faster, the runs were faster, the recovery days were there, and that was the common theme. I was like, I can definitely do the recovery days. But the rest of the training, I just wasn't so sure about. So Andy said, well, let's go day by day and the regular contact, and sort of talk me through it. So there were some changes in. I probably did a lot of running too easy, and I need to get the message quite clear that I'm pretty robust. I'm not suggesting everyone just goes and runs faster, and that's the way to do it.
yeah,
But there was definitely, we gradually increased the pace of our regular maintenance runs.
mm,
So I was probably doing them as an equivalent outside 7 minute pace. And Andy sort of saying, well, if you want to run your marathon at 5 minute pace, it's a little bit too far away.
yeah,
Let's have a look at going a little bit quicker. So now we'd regularly sort of run around about 6 minute pace for sort of our 10 milers and our sort of maintenance runs. But that took time. It was nearly two to 3 years before that became as comfortable as it is now.
yeah.
So the first thing really was I learned to train a bit more like an international marathoner,
Hmm.
and then I learned to race a little bit like one as well. So my half marathon PB going into Zurich was probably around about, I think it was 67:50 potentially, so just inside 68 minutes.
Yeah,
So the first thing Andy said was, well, we need to get that quicker. So I ran in my first season. I ran a half marathon PB, 65 flats, 65.0 something in Reading,
yeah,
uh, and knew then that was kind of like a quick win. We took big time off a half marathon PB, and that sort of led to the second big thing, and that was working on my confidence. Uh,
yeah,
that I actually deserved to be there, and that I've worked hard to be there as well. So
cool.
um, learning to train right and sort of developing confidence and efficacy in my own ability was probably the two big tasks that Andy had that year.
Yeah.
I think he worked quite well in those. And then I ran Berlin Marathon the following September, so just over a year after Zurich, and
Yeah.
ran 2:14.
Wow. Okay. So you'd taken 5 minutes off on your
Yeah,
marathon.
5 to 6 minutes off
Yeah.
my PB in that race. And that was it was a really strange day because again my aim was to try to, it's a big city marathon, I was never going to be at the front, but to be as close to the front as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And just ran, barely looked at the splits of the watch. I couldn't have told you what 2:14 pace even was. I was just getting into a group and trying to stay in that group for as long as I could.
Yeah.
And worked well that day.
So how did, so you've mentioned some of the changes there. How did it compare in terms of the amount of time that you spent training? Was that the same or different? And how did you fit that in at this point around work?
So it was broadly similar. If anything, it was a little bit shorter. So if I was normally doing 10 miles before work in 70 minutes, it was now 10 miles in 60 minutes, and we're talking nominal, but actually that's shower time and enough time to sit down and have your porridge in those 10 minutes rather than sprint out the door. So with work in 2015, I took up my first assistant principal role. So I made it a really busy year for myself. The targets: qualify for the Olympic Games and take on another new job at school.
Wow.
So I really did have to think about how I managed that time and where I could fit training in. So I did a lot of running before work early, and I tried to get the bulk of the running done nice and early, and that gave me that little bit of extra time in the evening. I never panicked about missing an easy run. So I did my morning run and something came up at work and I had an easy 5 miles. I wouldn't really be panicking about sacrificing that easy 5 miles if it meant that I had to stay a little bit later on work, but then could come home and have dinner and relax and recover. So I paid real close attention to that sort of how I was feeling about things as well. And the mileage didn't get crazy. So I think probably 100 for that marathon phase, 100 to 110 maximum. So it certainly didn't, talking about 10 hours really of training in the week.
Yeah. Okay. So and how does it work in terms of, you traveling and going to these events like the Europeans? Did they happen to fall in holidays, or how did that work?
Yeah, I've been quite lucky. So they have fallen during holidays. The Olympic Games were in August. Zurich was in August. The Commonwealth Games were probably the only one that in recent memory that I had to take some time off. So it was around about Easter time. But the marathon was would have been the Sunday that before we were going back to school on the Monday. So clearly being in Australia, it was going to be quite difficult for me to get back. So the school and the governors have been really supportive. And they said, don't worry, you can have the week, take the week if you need it. You can have that full week off. So they were really, really supportive about that. I managed we flew back on the Wednesday, and I think I landed in the Heathrow at 5 a.m. and hopped in the car and was back in school by sort of 8:30.
To work
on that day, just straight back in. Well, I was kind of thinking like I'm a little bit tired. I slept on the plane, but I'm okay. And actually, I'd be going home and probably been sat around drinking coffee. My wife was back at work as well, so I thought, well, I'm good and I'm feeling ready to go again. I'm actually excited to get back into the classroom, so I went straight to work.
That's great that they supported you with that.
They've been absolutely brilliant. So that was the main sort of big time, but that I needed to go. But they have been even supportive now. So I know that potentially if I do need to be a little bit later into work, which isn't often because I normally run there, but if I'm running a little bit late and I say, well, I'm not going to be there at 7:30, I'm going to be there at 8. Can someone cover my gate duty, for example? And there's always someone willing to support and help out with that. So got a fantastic team.
That's cool. Sorry, I made you jump then as well to 2018. So let's go back. So
that's fine.
Tell us about qualifying for Rio.
Yeah, so it was quite an early qualification. So I qualified in September, and sat kind of as the fastest Irish qualifier, waiting and hoping that people. I'm a big fan of the marathon. I'm a big fan of running. So anytime somebody's running the marathon, I want to go as super well for them. I want them to do really well in it because I know the sacrifices that people go through when they train for a marathon. I'm kind of thinking I don't want anyone to run badly. I just don't want them to run as well as I did, so that I can keep my qualification spot. So from September until April, really, I'm not really sure as to whether or not that was going to be fast enough to actually go to
What did
Rio.
you run? What did you run and where? What was you?
So I ran 2:14 in Berlin.
That was your Berlin
Yeah,
time.
that was Berlin. Yeah, so I ran 2:14 in Berlin. And I knew that after Berlin, you have quite a few sort of autumn marathons, and then right through to London in the spring. So every time a marathon was on, you were thinking, is this the one where an Irish guy's going to go quicker? And an Irish marathon at that stage had sort of started to gain momentum and gain a little bit of revival. So in Berlin, for example, we had 4 guys inside 2:15:30 in that race. And that was four guys. Given that in 2014, our fastest guy had run 2:17. So there was definitely beginning to notice a nice upsurge in marathon running in Ireland, and whereby I was delighted. I really am a big fan of Irish athletics, but I was also a bit apprehensive as to whether or not my time was going to be enough to get me there.
Yes, that was a long time for you to wait on it as well.
It was quite some time, and I can remember I was sat in a coffee shop in Loughborough when the call came through from the head of Athletics Ireland, basically saying there's an embargo, you can't tell anyone, but your selection's been confirmed, and we'll let you know when you can do like a media thing, or when you can tell you can tell your family, obviously, but just tell them to keep it relatively quiet for a while. Yes. So you want to scream it from the rooftops. I was going to say, delighted to be selected for the Olympics, but I had to keep it quiet for a little bit longer.
You didn't jump up in the middle of the coffee shop then?
No, I resisted the urge. I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and we all know how precious that is. It certainly wasn't going to spill it.
We had a question about coffee, actually. What is this with coffee? Let me just check. Where was that? How many coffees is too many in one day? From Rob Pooley.
Rob, I don't think there's a right answer to that. I don't think there is too much, is there? Maybe some nutritionists listening right now are going to get on at me and say you're probably drinking too much. But I'd say like on a school morning, I have my coffee machine flicks on at 5:40 a.m. and I've had 2 cups before I'm running at just inside 6. So I don't know if that's a good start to the day. For me, it is. I don't know whether or not that would be everyone's dream start to the day.
It's most people's, though.
Yeah, so multiple is the answer to that question.
So tell us about Rio.
It was. I always look back and think how grateful I am. To go and to get the opportunity to go to Brazil in the first place was incredible. But the experiences when I was there. So we spent a bit of time in a province called Uberlândia city. It's one of the bigger cities in Brazil. At a holding camp, and met some wonderful people there. Great experiences, and Athletics Ireland did everything possible to make us feel comfortable and enjoy it. So we went for a run one day, and they took us out in some really nice trails. It almost looks like their trails in Kenya. But the difference was that we had an armed patrol in front of us. So you had a guy in a 4x4 with 3 armed men in the back of this 4x4 escorting us around this run. So he carried our water bottles, and they were able to fire the water bottles back, throw the water bottles back to us and stuff. So it was very surreal being there, but it was an incredible experience. We went down to Rio sort of a week out from the marathon. So we're in the village for around about a week. And I know people try and describe it, but it's incredible. The village is just a remarkable sort of place. There's more or less nothing that you cannot get in the village. So you need everything from a McDonald's, if that's what you're interested in, through to your amazing coffees and PlayStation rooms and everything. So it was a really great experience overall, not just in terms of sporting experience. And then, of course, the race itself was just, it's hard to describe. I was on the start line, still pinching myself, not believing that here I am, this teacher from Leicester, from Belfast via Leicester, stood on the start line of the Olympic Games. It was just very surreal.
Yeah, amazing. What was it like walking out in the opening ceremony?
So we missed the opening ceremony. We missed that because we were at a holding camp for that still during that stage, a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. it's something that if I'm really fortunate and I'm touching wood right now, and I'm lucky enough to be selected for Tokyo, then it's something I would like to be able to do, to say that
Yes.
I've done it, because all the other experiences were marvelous.
Yeah. Any stories from inside the camp?
Um, no, I'm not sure if there's any we can share on this. Maybe we'll have a chat afterwards about that. No, nothing too scandalous, I promise. Um, very few.
What was your time in Rio?
Again, it was another 220,
Yep.
but it was very hot and very humid. Now we were
Hmm.
really lucky. Our conditions weren't as harsh as the girls were the ladies race. Sorry, was the week before.
Yep.
But it was still 30 degrees and 100% humidity, so it was tough conditions. I probably would have liked to go a little bit quicker, and I think I got a few things wrong in my race plan, and maybe didn't execute it quite the way I would have liked. Um, but it was still an incredible experience.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even? We say acclimatise, but how can you acclimatise to 100% humidity?
I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can. You can certainly prepare for the conditions, and by getting us there nearly a month early,
Hmm.
um, we, Athletics Ireland certainly and Sport Ireland certainly tried to get us used to that.
Yeah.
We were training in 36 degrees heat some days, and we had all sorts of sports science support from hydration tests through to lactate tests and all sorts of stuff going on. So we really did our best to prep for it. But unfortunately, in the day when you kind of the temperatures change and the environment changes a
Yeah.
little bit for the worse, it's really hard to get used to that. You just can't. That's where your race plan really needs to be spot on, and even making those last minute adjustments with confidence to make that race plan, um, to execute that race plan properly. So that's kind of adaptability of it.
Yeah. Cool. But then the next big, next big games for you was that Australia?
Yeah, it was the Commonwealth Games in Australia. Prepping for that when we talk about acclimatization was funny because I spent the full time really prepping in the UK at Loughborough, and of course we had a lot of snow that year. So I 1 week was doing a 20 miler in the snow and sleet, and then a week later was in the Gold Coast where it was 30 degrees and shorts and t-shirt. It's so surreal. So the hop between the two and the conditions between the two. But again, Athletics Northern Ireland were wonderful, and they got us out there nice and early. I was there because of school. I couldn't go quite as early as I would have liked, but we broke up on the Friday and we flew out on the Sunday. So it was as quick as we possibly could, which gave me about 2 weeks really before the race, enough time to do one or two sort of key sessions and get used to the heat. But it certainly felt like it was taking its time. I can remember doing a session on the first sort of week and thinking this is tough, and then getting halfway through the second week, and then we're sort of like 5 or 6 days out from the race, and I'm thinking I still don't feel quite right. And then the very next day, doing my final session, it just clicked, and I was like, right, I actually feel like I'm really good to go here, which was a nice confidence boost 3 or 4 days before the race.
How do you deal with the mental side of the game? So in the run up to before that final session where things just clicked, how do you handle that when you're first out there?
I think I was just really grateful in the first instance to be there. So I had to remind myself how privileged I was, and how lucky I was to be in the Gold Coast. I never really envisaged myself being that side of the world.
Hmm.
And there I was in Australia about to run a marathon. So about to do something I really wanted to do and really loved doing. So I think the mental side of it becomes a little bit easier when you conceptualize it and put it all in context. Again,
Hmm.
I was teaching in Loughborough 2 weeks before that, and here I am about to go on the start line against some of the best athletes in the Commonwealth. And it's remembering that I am really grateful and I am really privileged and really lucky. There's a lot of people who would love to have this experience, but
Yeah.
I have it, so I feel I owe it to them and to myself to really enjoy that. And I think that makes the mental side of it a little bit easier to handle. It doesn't mean I don't get nervous, and it doesn't mean that I don't fret a little bit about it. I think everyone does, but it just helps me put it all in a little bit of perspective.
Hmm. Yeah. Cool. And then tell us about the race then, because I know that was a good one for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was. So I kind of had a game plan beforehand. I looked. It was like it's going to be 30 degrees, maybe slightly warmer. So
Hmm.
again, I went back to my little Google friend and spoke with Andy, and we both sort of looked at what pace, what did I think I could run. So if it was in the UK, what sort of time did I think I could run? And we're sort of saying we think that from training somewhere around about 2:12 to 2:13. Uh,
Yeah.
if it was sort of British type weather, 14 degrees and quite a nice day, it wasn't going to be that. So we had to look at, well, what might that mean if the temperatures are really hot? And it was somewhere around about, depending on how hot it got, somewhere around about 220 again. That famous number is popping back up, but somewhere around about 220, 221. So I knew that was around about 520 per mile or 320-ish per kilometre. So I just set off at that pace.
Hmm.
And actually on the morning of the race, it was hotter than that. It was well into the mid 30s by the race sort of start time. And it was
Yeah.
quite early. So I set out at that kind of pace and that rhythm, and I didn't really pay attention to what everyone else was doing. I was quite lucky because they started out quite slow for them for the first 5k anyway. So got to 5k
Yeah.
and I was bang on 320 pace, and was just inside 70 minutes at halfway, which
Hmm.
again was around about 70 minutes, which is again about 320. So I've been fairly even splitting. Um,
Yeah.
at halfway, I think I was somewhere in the mid 30s, somewhere in the 30s, maybe high 20s at halfway. But then when I turned and started to come back, so it was kind of like the out and back bit of the course. When I turned and started to come back, I'd suddenly see people getting a little bit closer. So I started passing people, but I was running
Yeah.
the same pace. So I was still running around about 320 per k, 520 per mile. So it was still the
Hmm.
same sort of rhythm all the way through. And suddenly I was passing big groups of people. And the heat had really started to take its effect on people. So I just kept
Hmm.
going at my own little sort of my rhythm that I knew from the start. I was like, I think I can keep this going for the full distance. Kept checking, kept sort of having a look every kilometer just to make sure I wasn't getting carried away. And by about sort of 20 miles, I'd lost track of how many of where I was, and I sort of tried to count, and I'd lost track of where I was. So in my head, I was probably top 15. It
Yeah.
turns out I was probably more like top 8 at that stage. Um,
Okay.
and then coming into the final 5k, some people are shouting from the side of the road, you could get a medal, you could get a medal. Just some Australian people watching the race, and I was like, I think I'm probably 8th place maybe. Like I'd have to pass quite a few people, and then with about 2 or 3k to go, I kind of realised that the group in front of me were the medals, and they were just a little bit too far, and they were still running really well, so they were still going to maintain their pace. So I tried to chase it a little bit and didn't quite get there, so ended up finishing 4th place. But I think afterwards, I think I said I won 4th place there, and I think I did because I was ranked outside the top 20, and to come away with the 4th place and to run the kind of the race plan that I knew I could do, um, was kind of really good in its own.
So did that? Do you feel like it did all just click, like you said in that last training session that day, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was just I think my body at that stage had been there long enough, and it kind of just got used to the conditions and used to the heat.
Hmm.
And importantly, I guess at that stage, I'd started to reduce what I was doing. I'd come from the UK, where I was running 110 miles a week in the snow,
Hmm.
and I'd gone out to Australia where I was down around about sort of 70, 80 miles a week in the sunshine. So I think my body had
Hmm.
just kind of recovered at the right time was part of it, which meant the taper went quite well. But also it just clicked. I think everything just fell into place in terms of the physiology of it. So getting used to the heat and my body coping and dealing with the heat.
Yeah.
And the pace began to feel a little bit smoother. So yeah, I think it just literally just got lucky to click at the right time.
And what time did you come in on that?
Around 219 and a bit, 219 high. So I think I was more or less even splits. So I think there was 1 second or 2 second difference between my first kilometer and my middle kilometer and my last kilometer. So
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
brilliant.
got quite a good rhythm there.
Yeah. But then you finished the race. You got on the plane. You were back in work at 9 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah, flew straight back in. Yep, a long haul flight. It was quite nice. Had a little bit of sleep and some burgers at the airport, and
Yeah.
then yeah, back in work for breakfast.
What was that like when you went and sat at your desk? Considering I know it's a long flight from Australia, but with it, the prior 48 hours, you're on the start line of a race like that, and then 2 days later, you
back in work. It was a bit surreal, and I think I was still kind of half on cloud nine from it all. So I still had that kind of running on emotions, kind of
yeah.
like the energy that was feeding from the race itself and it going well. So I was still fueled by the energy from that, fueled by a lot of strong coffee. And then once you get back into school, the kids are really excited and they were great. And BBC came and did a little bit that day as well, and it was really really nice. But then they kind of put things into perspective. It's like the excitement drops for them, and then they're like, "Oh, so what's for homework?" And everything's just moved on. So it was quite nice. It was quite refreshing just to enjoy the moment while at the start, and then just get on with being back and doing what I love to do in school.
Yeah, kids are good at that, aren't they?
They're brilliant. Just putting things. If you have a good session and you think everything's great, and then the kids can put it into perspective. You had a bad day or a bad race, and you go into school and you think, actually, in real life terms, it's not that important. When you talk to some of the children.
So where was your head at then? Then were you immediately on trying to get to Tokyo, or what?
So that must have been so March or April. So I had after that I had a month really to kind of recover, turn it around again, and get ready to go in the European Championships in Berlin.
Yeah.
So European Marathon Champs were in Berlin that year.
Yep.
Hopefully you didn't hear the dog barking in the background.
That's all right.
European Marathon Champs were in Berlin that year. So I had a little bit of time just to turn things around and then try to get ready to go again.
Yeah. No, it's not gone again.
No, I can hear you now. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it had gone again then.
Oh, no, back in. So the dog was barking away in the background. So yeah, European champs were next on the agenda then in 2018.
Yeah. Cool. So, 1 second. Sorry, I'm just going to make a note of where we're up to.
No, that's grand.
Tell us about the Euros then.
Yeah, so again, the middle of the summer, which is never particularly nice in any European country. So we got really lucky again. The 10K was the week before us, and I think they had at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night, well into the 30 degrees. So it was always going to be a hot championships. And for us, it was probably more like 25. So coming from Australia 3 months earlier and racing in 36, 25 was quite refreshing, quite nice.
Yeah.
But still required a pretty sensible race plan.
Cool. And how did you get on in the Euros that year?
So I was 15th the Euros that summer. So I'd gone from, in 2014, I was 38th and around 217, 216 in Berlin European Championships in 2018 to finish 15th place. So a little bit of an improvement. Again, it was very much, I was maybe outside the top 50 at halfway, and then just picking things off and moving through sensibly in the second half through the 15th.
So I think I read one of your interviews. I think it was 2018, and you said in one of them that you don't do any strength training, or you haven't up until that point.
Yeah, so I did very little strength training. Certainly didn't do huge amounts before then, and I'm starting to really program it in now. I think it's really important. I could run a lot and wasn't getting injured and was staying relatively robust. So it was kind of got to the stage where I'm now at the stage where I can run, and I can run all day probably, but to get that little bit extra, I'm probably not going to get it from running alone. So I'm trying to build in some strength and conditioning into the program. But yeah, until 2018, I did zero. Once I went out to Australia, I actually had a few problems with my quads,
Yeah,
probably caused from the snow here and my glutes doing a lot of the work and kind of just offset things a little bit. So I made a promise to the physios out there that I would get more physiotherapy because until 2018, I'd never had a massage, and B, that I would start to incorporate a little bit of strength and conditioning into my training program just to try to find that little bit of extra potentially in the latter
yeah,
stages of the marathon.
yeah. It's amazing again because a lot of our community, it's a common thing that will come up that runners just don't strength train because they either just don't fit it in or they just love to run. So it's good to hear you saying that you didn't have a massage until 2018 and that you only when
and
you
I
started doing
and I, and
strength
I hear the
training then.
struggle. I feel the struggle as well. So what we did here in the summer was we had a we well I certainly didn't do as much gym last year as I planned to do, and I could make all sorts of excuses for myself, but excuses don't really work when you're at mile 22, and you can tell yourself all the excuses you want, but it's not going to make a performance any better on that day. So I kind of eliminated the excuses by during the summer we converted our garage into a gym. I learned how to put up some plasterboard and yeah, we put down some nice flooring and converted it into a gym. So we've now got the gym at home. So I have
Yeah.
literally no excuses now not to be out there and to really take care of those things.
And is that something that your coach encourages you to do as well, or does he focus specifically on your run?
So yeah, Andy focuses on the things that are going to make us better athletes, and for each of
Mm.
his athletes that could be a different sort of thing. So we've got some of Andy's group are really good at strength and conditioning, and for
Mm.
them, their focus might be a little bit more on their speed work or their endurance. And for
Yeah,
me, my endurance is pretty strong. My speed work needs a little bit of work, but my focus on gym and actually getting that routine is important. So yeah, I get reminded to make sure that I am doing my bits of S&C and my stretching and routines
yeah,
in the week. And more importantly, I might get in the recovery out massage to help me recover because I'm still maybe a bit neglectful in that as well.
so all of these things combined, I mean, I've looked at your last few tweets, and this year has been particularly good, hasn't it, for you? Of all these, do you feel all these things combined, and just experience now it's all coming together in terms of your running? Um,
I think so. I think I found the enjoyment again, and I think you can track back to where that enjoyment really sort of started to show, and that fire was relit because the performance started to improve. And it's like we said at the start: if you enjoy doing something, then it's hard not to get better at it. But 2020 has been it's been a very difficult year for a lot of people. And a lot of people have taken to physical activity and running. It's one of those
Mhm.
sports that you open up the front door and put on your trainers, and you can join. Everyone can join in with a little bit of running. Um, but for me, 2020 has been challenging in its own ways with school, and
Yeah,
running really has become a solace in that, and it led to some good performances. So I opened up 2020 with a PB in the
yeah,
marathon in Seville, and I kind of closed
yeah,
it. I say closed it. I'm not sure what the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks might hold, but closed it with a 62-minute half marathon PB in Poland 2 weekends ago. So
yes.
it's been a challenging year in its own right, but it's also been I kind of have to look and celebrate the successes that did happen this year.
Yeah, I mean, you must be pleased with that with those times. I mean, 2:10 you've took, that's a big PB, isn't it?
Yeah, so I 210 are in Seville and even 62. So 62 was just a little PB. I say 62. I should probably be a bit more fair to low 62 runners and tell everyone it was 62:58. So I did I dipped just inside it, the 63,
Yeah,
but so it was a little PB. My 63:05 was my PB before that. So
mhm.
slight PB over the half, but you got to celebrate all those every second, really. We don't
Yeah,
always run PBs, so it's nice to celebrate them when you do.
yeah, definitely. So how's this year changed for you? Because obviously Tokyo has been moved back a year, and what's this year look like, and how does the next 6 months look like? For you.
So I'm quite lucky that I said I'd moved jobs, so I started a new school, and
Mhm.
that's been a nice welcome distraction. in some ways. So it kind of keeps the year stable.
Mhm.
I'd go to school Monday to Friday and sort of build any training camps that I would have done. We aren't doing it at the minute, but build that around the school holidays. So that framework's
Yeah.
still there, and that sort of framework provides me the routines every day. So training is very much focused on getting stronger. Now I will spend a little bit of time getting a little bit quicker, trying to lower the 10k PB, and hope that some races return to run that PB.
Yeah.
And then sort of once Christmas comes around, just into the new year, we'll start to think about what we can do to add value to performance if we get selected for Tokyo. So for me, that's going to be
Mhm.
very much that routine of the strength and conditioning, adding that into the program, while building back in some decent long mileage, and making sure that I'm aerobically quite strong too. So in terms of the year, the structure will very much follow what it would have done last year.
Yeah.
I would have liked to run another marathon, but it's just hard to commit to something and work around it, knowing that it might not happen. The
Yeah.
marathons may not actually go ahead. So I would have liked to run one, but I'm happy to hopefully save the best performance for Tokyo.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Well, let me check what other questions we got asked over on Twitter. There was a couple more
Yeah.
from the community that wanted to ask you. So it was what's your opinion on the Nike shoes? Do you feel it gives athletes an unfair advantage?
An unfair advantage. There's definitely athletics has been quite slow in some ways to embrace the technology.
Hmm.
Cycling and swimming and other sports have been quite welcoming.
Yeah.
And running should be a simple sport, and that everyone should be able to access the same shoes, and shouldn't be priced out of the market in accessing those shoes. So I can see why there may be a perception of it being slightly unfair on other athletes, but they definitely help. But they aren't going to run the marathon for you, or run the race for you, should I say? We may not be talking about marathons. So I've run in a few different brands and a few different shoes. I'm not sponsored and not contracted, so I've been able to sort of try different brands and try different shoes. And the
Yep.
market's becoming a lot closer together. So there are other brands that are releasing carbon plated shoes and sort of shoes with relatively high stack heights. So the market is becoming much more competitive, and kind
Yep.
of drawn that any advantage that may have been there is coming a little bit closer together. But it's also, I think it's important that people or athletes, as much as anyone else, realize that you need to do the training, and the shoe isn't gonna run the race for you. It's certainly going to help potentially in the latter stages of the marathon, but if you haven't done the training, you'll still find things incredibly difficult later on.
Mhm. Cool. Where's your favourite training camp destination from Stu Spencer? That.
Oh, so I've got two sort of favorite places, and they're both very close together. There's a place called the Rio Segura, and that's in Torrevieja. So I'm really lucky that a good friend of mine owns Casa Carrera, which is
Okay.
a sort of training set, houses. I say houses now. He's got two, just outside just in Torrevieja, which is a wonderful place to go. And the trails there are fantastic. So there's one called the Yellow Brick Road, is the second favorite one,
Yep.
which is a kind of a short sand trail, runs along the Pink Lakes. Uh, it's as nice as it sounds, really. And then the Rio Segura, which is incredible. It's 180 kilometers of sort of flat trail and cycle paths that
Yep.
runs from Murcia City right through to the coast. So probably they'd be my two favorite sort of places to go.
Brilliant. What's your favourite non-running hobby?
Favorite non-running hobby.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this too loud because Andy will be listening, but I still love playing a bit of football.
Yeah.
Although I don't play, I should point out that I haven't played in quite some time. But up until sort of 2016, 2017, I was still playing quite a lot of football,
Yeah.
five-a-side leagues and things like that. Until I got told in no uncertain terms that it's probably not the best thing for an elite athlete or an international athlete to do. So that's probably my favourite. Well, I don't get to do it quite as much
Yeah.
as I used to.
Have you? Who's your team? Who do you follow?
I'm an Arsenal fan actually, so it's
Oh,
been
okay.
a long a hard couple of seasons for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Arteta's done a good job since he's come in and made some good signings. I think Partey might be a good signing for Arsenal.
Some very good signings. We just needed to click a little bit more, and I tell you,
Yeah.
Arteta looks like he could still play a bit.
Yes, yeah, very good. Well, other questions we had was, what's your favourite? Have you got a favourite series on Netflix or Prime or anything you'd recommend for people?
Oh, I've just finished watching The Good Doctor. Um, a
Oh, yeah, yeah.
very good show. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
No, I haven't. I've got it recorded. I have got it recorded in my Sky Planner, but I am yet to press play on it.
Highly
So,
recommended. Really enjoyed that. I'm going to make it sound like I watch lots of Netflix. I genuinely don't, but Blacklist is another one.
yep.
Another really good show where, yeah, definitely recommend either of those two. But I promise I don't watch huge amounts. That was a summer watching.
Cool. Favorite film and favorite book? They're the last two.
Oh, I'm a big Grisham fan. So it's hard to really pick between any of the Grisham books. So I'm not going to commit too much to one. But I'm a huge Grisham fan. I can really recommend picking up a Grisham novel if you want something that's not sport related and something a little different.
Yeah.
Favorite film? That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I'm still a big
It
fan
is.
of some of the old favourites. So the Green Mile, for example, I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of that. I haven't seen a film in recently, so if anybody's got any recommendations of one that I really should go and watch and it's a bit more recent, then feel free to ping them into me. But yeah, I wouldn't be a huge movie fan in general, but Green Mile probably still my all time favourite.
Yeah, it's a good one. I've recently been watching a couple of the older films. I watched Saving Private Ryan actually last weekend, which is another great one with Tom Hanks. But cool. Well, look, I think it's time to wrap it up. Thanks very much for your time this evening. It's been great speaking with you and hearing about your journey. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what hopefully that the events go ahead and seeing how the next 12 months goes for you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully, like you say, the games and stuff do go ahead, and I should say, and hopefully I get selected as well. So if people want to follow the journey,
Yeah.
then they know where to find me on social media. They can come along and follow me on it.
Yeah, so just give us all your handles again, just so everybody can follow along.
Yeah,
and
both broadly similar.
comment.
So at Kev Running 2016. And you're more than welcome to, and that's Instagram and Twitter. I've just started with Instagram, so if anybody's got any tips as well on how to use it, it's quite new to me, so feel free to offer me any advice you have.
Cool. Well, I'm sure there'll be a few people following who'll drop you some messages about that. Thanks ever so much, Kev. It's been great chatting.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers.
Thank you.